Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. These family stories are not of the warm and fuzzy variety, showing how sometimes those closest to us can channel the stuff of nightmares. The Lost Twin. 38-year-old Hannah was facing a grim prognosis. Doctors had discovered she had advanced uterine cancer and estimated she had only months to live. Bedridden in her childhood home, Hannah passed the time reminiscing with her mother about her life, looking through old photo albums. As they examined Hannah's baby pictures, her mother reiterated that she'd been an only child, pointing to images of her holding Hannah right after she was born. But Hannah noticed something troubling in one of the photos. It showed her mother holding not one, but two infants. When confronted, Hannah's mother broke down, finally admitting what she'd kept secret all these years. Hannah had indeed been born a twin. But the second child, a girl named Greta, had been given up for adoption when young. The reason remained chillingly inexplicable. Hannah learned her mother had sonograms documenting only one fetus, and baby photos showed only Hannah with their mother in the hospital after delivery. It defied all logic and reason. How could Greta have existed? Desperate for answers, Hannah insisted her mother share everything she knew about her mysterious twin. Haltingly, she explained that Greta had been born with an odd birthmark on her arm, identical to Hannah's. As infants, Greta would sometimes inexplicably disappear from photos and video footage, as if she flickered in and out of reality. Most disturbingly, as a toddler, Hannah had once been found in the closet with Greta, her nose cut off and tongue badly mutilated, injuries she somehow miraculously recovered from. Hannah had no memory of this, although her scars remained. Greta displayed other profoundly disturbing tendencies as a toddler, including mutilating animals. Afraid of what Greta was capable of, their parents made the devastating choice to give her up. The revelations gave Hannah chills. At age 13 in 1992, Hannah attended summer camp, where she fatefully met a fellow camper named Greta. Hannah and Greta discovered they bore an identical birthmark in the same spot on their arms, forming an instant bond. When the week ended, the girls tearfully exchanged addresses, promising to keep in touch. Throughout the next year, Hannah wrote to Greta devotedly, though her letters went unanswered. When she called the number Greta had given her, a strange woman claimed the family had moved, with no forwarding information. Distraught, Hannah sank into deep mourning over losing her new soulmate. Over the years, Hannah convinced herself Greta had been merely an imaginary friend. Now Hannah understood. The Greta of her childhood had been her own sister's lingering supernatural presence. In her final months, Hannah found some peace learning the truth of her twin. While they answered questions, the revelations also shook Hannah deeply. She realised Greta had indeed been real, not imaginary, and her lurking presence had persisted as an apparition only Hannah could see and hear. Worse, Hannah always sensed the ghostly twin hated her, unable to forgive being abandoned. The image resurfaced of Greta's angry face that terrible night her twin turned on her, leaving a trauma buried deep in her psyche. With only months left, Hannah also lived in fear of encountering Greta again in this world or the next. Hannah only hoped that soon they could be reunited in the afterlife to heal the painful scars of their severed sisterly bond. Fearing she would soon face Greta again on the other side, she wondered if there would be understanding and reconciliation at last for the sisters whom fate had torn apart, or if Greta's wounded wrath would haunt her in perpetuity. Mystery visitor. After his grandmother's death, 13-year-old Brian began spending weekends at his widowed grandfather's apartment. One Friday night, as Brian drifted off on the living room couch, he was roused by the sound of shuffling footsteps from the kitchen. Frightened, Brian hid under the covers as the heavy footsteps drew closer before stopping in the living room. He felt the end of the couch depress as if someone had sat down next to his feet. Terrified, Brian cried out, "Grandma," thinking her spirit had come to visit him. But the unseen entity pressed down harder, climbing onto the couch over Brian's blanketed form. Mustering all his courage, Brian leapt up, turned on all the lights, and scanned the room. But no one was there. Too afraid to sleep, Brian crawled into bed with his grandfather, who never even stirred. In the morning, when Brian told him what had happened, his grandfather gazed silently at the floor for several moments before speaking. He revealed that since Brian's grandmother had passed, a menacing entity that hated him had been tormenting him nightly, telling him to die. Now it appeared to have its sights set on Brian. Brian never again stayed overnight at his grandfather's. In later years, his mother shared more of the story. Brian's grandfather had become erratic following the encounters, claiming to see and hear his dead wife, even though she had died at the hospital. His mental health rapidly declined until his death a year after Brian's terrifying visit. Brian realised then that his experience had been a twisted game orchestrated by a cruel, malevolent entity, one that had broken his grandfather's mind before coming for him next. He considered himself lucky to have trusted his instincts and escaped before it had its way. The McDougall family haunting. In the summer of 2019, the McDougall family moved into a 19th century Victorian mansion in rural Pennsylvania. John and Mary McDougall hoped the spacious home would give their 3 young daughters, Emily age 8, Olivia age 6 and Hannah age 4, plenty of room to play and grow. But soon after moving in, the McDougalls began experiencing strange and frightening events. It began with footsteps and voices late at night, which the parents assumed were the creaks and groans of the old house. But the girls started complaining of bad dreams, saying the scary lady was visiting them while they slept. One night, Mary awoke to find the antique dolls she had decorated the girls' bedroom with strewn across the floor, their heads twisted off and eyes gouged out. John decided to set up a camera in the bedroom to see if one of the girls was destroying the dolls. But the footage showed the dolls being violently thrown off the shelves by an invisible force while the girls slept peacefully. The paranormal activity continued to escalate. Doors would slam shut, disembodied voices called out the family's names, and items disappeared from one room only to reappear somewhere else. The girls became too frightened to sleep in their own beds, insisting on piling into their parents' bed at night. Desperate for help, the McDougalls brought in a psychic medium named Madame Zelda. The moment she stepped foot in the house, Zelda proclaimed that an evil entity had attached itself to the home. Through her abilities, Zelda communicated with the spirit and discovered it was the ghost of a woman named Bethany who had lived there in the late 1800s. Bethany confessed to having been a practicing witch who would lure little girls into the home and dispatch them as sacrifices. Her victims were buried in the basement, which explained the putrid smells the family had been noticing. Bethany's spirit was enraged that a new family with young girls had moved into her home, prompting the escalating supernatural attacks. Zelda recommended holding a séance to force Bethany's spirit out of the house. Although sceptical, John agreed to participate. The group gathered around a table in the living room, joining hands as Zelda called out to the demonic entity. Suddenly, all the lights went out and the table began violently shaking. Bethany manifested before them, a skeletal apparition with hollow eyes. The McDougalls were horrified as she let out an unearthly scream and vanished. After the séance, the paranormal activity seemed to stop. The family enjoyed several peaceful, uneventful days in the home. But late one night, John was awoken by the sound of his daughters screaming. He rushed into their bedroom to find all three girls sitting up in bed, pointing at the closet. When John threw open the doors, Bethany's monstrous spirit reappeared, screaming, "You will never be rid of me," before disappearing again. Having experienced more than enough supernatural terror, the McDougalls immediately put the house up for sale and moved out the very next day. Over the years, many more families have tried to live in the home, but all were eventually driven out by the evil presence of Bethany. To this day, the abandoned mansion remains vacant, a testament to a malevolent haunting that refuses to release its grip from the physical world. Barry's return. In June 2018, Barry returned to his childhood home to attend a relative's funeral down the street. Now 38, Barry was saddened to find the old house looking run down, his former yard and trees unrecognisable. Unable to resist, Barry entered the open garage, the familiar smells of sawdust and wood chips transporting him back to fond memories, helping his father build things there as a boy. When a man turned from the buzzsaw to greet him, Barry was thunderstruck. Despite the 28 years since his passing from cancer, Barry's father stood before him in the flesh. Too overcome to speak, Barry could only cry out, "Dad," as the older man repeated the same line he had said to Barry thousands of times growing up, "Can I help you?" Barry stammered his name, but his father showed no signs of recognition. When a young blonde boy that was Barry's mirror image as a child ran into the garage calling the man Dad, Barry suddenly understood. He had not travelled back in time, but had glimpsed into the parallel present of another reality, one where his own youthful doppelganger and somehow his deceased father still lived on. As Barry grappled with this metaphysical revelation, his father leaned in and whispered that returning here would only traumatise the boy. Nodding through tears, Barry understood. This miraculous glimpse through a window into another life was a gift, but one that should not be chased any further for the sake of his alternate self. Without looking back again, Barry walked away down that achingly familiar driveway, back to his own timeline and destiny, profoundly changed by the encounter.